Good morning to one and all present here today. Welcome to the English class. Today, I, Miss Rini Sarika, is going to teach you a new poem that is a photograph written by Shirley Toulson. So, without further ado, let's move on, and I will be sharing my screen with you. I hope you all can see on your screens whatever is being displayed. So here, this is a slide which shows you a photograph. As you can see here, the photograph has three people in it. That is three sisters actually. One is the eldest one, which is standing in the middle, and she is accompanied with two younger sisters. And the name of the younger sisters were Dolly and Betty. So, who is this girl who is standing holding hands with the two sisters? She is the poet's mother, Shirley Toulson's mother. And when we read this particular poem, we'll come to know why this poem has written and what is the purpose for writing this poem and entitling it as a photograph. Surely, before I start with this explanation and everything, I would like you all to know something about the poet. So let's learn something about the poet. Here in this image, you can see this is Shirley Toulson, and the full name of Shirley Toulson is Kathleen Shirley Toulson. She was born on 20th May 1924, and she has done her English from Priorsfield School and then pursued it at Birkbeck University of London. She has written many famous books, out of which the ones which are profoundly read are Shadows in an Orchard, The Companion Guide to Devon, The Drover's Roads of Wales, etc. Now she has contributed in some other spheres of life as well. Like when there was World War II, she had, given her services in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, that is to serve the humans who were injured and all. And then she had become the member of an informal poet group also, which was named as the group. And finally, Shirley Toulson, she died on 23rd September 2018. And this particular poem, photograph, it is actually written, given a tribute to her mother. And in this poem, she has written about beautifully about the three phases or the three aspects of her life. The poem consists of three stanzas, and the first stanza basically, or the it shows us the first stage, and that is the poet's mother, where she's standing on the beach, and then she's holding her hands with her two girl cousins. At that time, she was around 12 years old. I'm talking about the poet's mother. She was around 12 years old, and she was paddling in the water with her girl cousins, and her uncle took a photograph, and where that photograph is kept as a memory very fondly by the poet also, and the poet's mother also had kept it. Now, during one day when she was, maybe cleaning, perhaps cleaning in her house, the poet comes across this photograph of her mother, and that's when she goes back into the past, where she recalls her mother, she recalls her mother's two girl cousins, and then the poet becomes very, very nostalgic and sad, and she remembers that had her mother been alive now, and had she seen that photograph right now with her two girl cousins, she would have laughed, and the poet would have seen her mother laugh in a very, very childish way, in a very, very cute way. And the poet basically misses her mother a lot because now her mother is dead, and that is why she has written this poem as a tribute to her mother. Now, before I explain you each and everything, let's read the text of the poem once, and then I'll be going line by line and stanza by stanza. I'll be explaining you each and everything. Let's read the text once. The poet says, the cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins were paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile her, through their hair at the uncle with the camera, a sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born, and the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. Some 23 years later, she'd laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she'd say, and look how they dressed up for the beach. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter, both wry with the labored ease of loss. Now she's been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and all this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. This is what the poet is writing beautifully about her mother, her feelings, her emotions when she came across that photograph, and when she feels about her mother very badly. She is very sorrowful in this particular poem. The tone is very sad. The tone is very grave in this particular, very serious in this particular poem. And let's go now through the poem line by line and stanza by stanza. So, the poem consists of three stanzas, and each stanza has a stage of the poet's life. The first stanza is, you can see on the slide, the text is written on the photograph where the camera is made, and the key points are written on the blank side of the slide. The text, the cardboard shows me how it was. The poet says that she found a cardboard. A cardboard is a photograph of her mother and her two girl cousins who were at the beach. And the cardboard here could mean to a photograph which was either in a photo frame or a photograph which was stuck on a piece of cardboard. It was pasted on a piece of cardboard, and which the poet has come across now. So she says that the cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. And when she comes across the photograph, she comes to know that how her mother was happy in her childhood days with her two girl cousins once when they had gone paddling on the beach, each one holding one of my mother's hands. And both the girl cousins, they were holding one of her mother's hands, the poet's mother's hands. And she, the big girl here is the poet's mother, some 12 years or so. She was of about some 12 years or so, and she was the big girl, and she was taking care of the two girl cousins holding their hands on the beach. Now you can see the key points here. The picture showed about three girls who were paddling on the sea beach, and girl who was standing in the middle was the oldest, that was the poet's mother, and she was the tallest also. And beside the poet's mother, there are two more girls that are her two girl cousins. Now let's read the second part. The poet says, all three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. So who took the picture of the three girl cousins? It was their uncle who was taking the picture. And all three of them stood still, means stood stationary, stood completely rigid, and they were smiling. They were posing for the picture, for the snapshot, and they were standing still. And their hair was, scattered because of the wind, because near the beach it was windy, and the weather, it was very windy. It was lots of waves were coming in, and lots of wind was blowing. So their hair, it was being scattered because of the wind, and it was coming on their faces, and they were smiling through their hair when they were posing at the camera. A sweet face, my mother's. And she says my mother's face was very, very sweet. That was before I was born. And this picture is of a mother when she was 12 years of age, and that at that time the poet's mother was not so the poet was not born, I'm sorry, the poet was not born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less. And she says that although this photograph, it has been taken long years back, or many years ago, but still the sea, still now it remains, it seems that it remains the same, it has not changed. On the contrary, the terribly transient feet to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. Terribly here means extremely, transient here means temporary, and feet here means the footprints of the three people who were there on the beach, and they were paddling through the water. So terribly transient here is actually a transferred epithet, which means that the feet is a noun and terribly is an adjective which is describing the feet noun. But on the other hand, it is also having a very, very deep meaning. The first meaning, the simpler meaning, is that the poet's mother and her two girl cousins, they were just paddling in the water. Paddling means to just walking in the water and amongst the waves, and their footprints were being washed away by the waves, which shows that the human nature, or the nature of humans who are coming and who are going on this earth, nothing is, permanent. Things keep changing, like the footprints, they keep getting erased, and then the new footprints are made when they walk, and the waves erase them again and again. That is the transient feet. On a deeper level here, the poet is comparing the nature to the humans. The nature more or less remains the same after generations, And the humans, they show their changing nature. They were born as babies, they grow, then they become old, and finally they die, and their footprints are forever gone away from this earth. So this transferred epithet is talking about the transient or the temporary nature of humans. On the contrary, talking about the permanent nature of the nature, or the permanent aspect characteristic of the nature which remains permanent. The sea, on the other hand, remains the same from generations to generations, or there may be less, very less change in the sea as compared to how the humans they change once they are born on this earth, and once they die, their traces are no more found on this earth. Now here on the white, on the blank side, the key points of this stanza are written. The uncle was clicking a picture and there was windy weather, so she's describing actually how the photograph was taken. Here on the slide, you all can see the word meanings, which you can write later once you listen to the poem completely. Now let's move to the second stanza. The poet says, some 20, 30 years later, she'd laugh at the snapshot. Now the second phase or the second stage has started in the second stanza, and she's talking about 20, 30 years later, when she says that had my mother been here right now, or had she been alive right now, then now after 20, 30 years later, she would have laughed at the snapshot. Snapshot means the photograph. If my mother would have found the photograph today, she would have laughed at it, looking at it. Why? Because she must be remembering her childhood memories, the two girl cousins, and how happy they were in the childhood. And the second reason was that she would have said, see Betty and Dolly, she'd say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. So she would have laughed at the way they all were dressed at the beach, because children usually they don't like how their parents used to dress them when they are small, when they are younger. So she says that she would have said that, look Dolly and look Betty, look at our clothes, how we were dressed when we were taken at the beach by our parents. The sea holiday was her past, and she would have said that the sea holiday was her past. And it is considered by the poet that yes, it was in the past that the mother had a sea holiday. And the poet says, mine is her laughter. And she says, now for me, the laughter of my mother is the thing of the past, because now my mother is no more, she's dead. And I miss her laughter, I miss her presence. Beside me, I miss everything about my mother. And both wry, and she says both feel disgusted with the labored ease of loss. She says, I cannot even laugh now. I feel disgusted if I'm laughing. And here the word labored ease of loss is an oxymoron. Oxymoron is a poetic device in which two opposite words are put together. For example, angelic demon and demonic angel. An angel can never be a demon can never be angelic or an angel. So if we say that boy is behave or that boy behaves, looks like an angelic demon, so that is an oxymoron, where we are comparing both completely contrasting opposite personalities with two words putting together in the written text. So here labored ease, labored means to work very hard and ease means to rest. So here the poet has beautifully described that she is, working very hard. She's struggling very hard. She's laboring very hard to come out from the grievances, and from the sadness and from the sorrow that she's feeling when she feels that her mother is no more. Every day she's struggling to come out from her mother's loss and to make her life easy. She is doing that because it's when we lose some dead one, when we have a death in the family of a loved one in amongst us, it's very, very difficult to go through that experience, go through that sorrow, go through that grief. And trust me, it creates a hollow, vacant space in the heart and becomes very difficult to cope up with this. Every day is literally a struggle, how to live, how to do, how to go, how to talk, how to go out, all these things. It becomes a lot more difficult than a normal individual who's happier than the person who's grieving. So she says that I'm struggling every day to make my life easier, to come out easier from the loss, to come out from the loss, or to come out easily from that loss of my mother. And till now, this means that till now the poet is still grieving her mother. She is missing her mother, and she wants her mother back somehow beside her. But she's obviously it is not possible for her. But she's saying, "I'm trying very hard. I'm working very hard to make my life easier." Now, here the loss refers to the loss of her mother. That means the mother is dead, and she is missing her mother's laughter also and her presence also, which is never going to return to the poet. In the next slide, you can see some of the word meanings which you can write while for your own self study. Later on, you can write it. Now, let's move to the third stanza as well as the third stage which the poet is describing in the poem. She says, "Now she's been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived." That girl, she's talking about her mother, the happy childhood, 12 year old mother who was very happy in her childhood. And now she's dead, and she's dead as many years as she lived. That means it has been now around 12 years that her mother is dead. And of this circumstance, means of this situation, there is nothing to say at all. And the poet says, "I don't want to say anything. There is nothing to say at all about my mother's death." And she does not want to speak about it. She does not want to talk about it because it's silence silences. She says, "Because my mother is dead, she is silent now. She is never going to speak ever to me. I'm not going to hear her voice ever." And because of that silence, my own talkative nature has become silent, means it has converted me also into a silent creature, into a silent human being. So, this kind of attitude, the poet ends the poem on a very sad note that she cannot she's grieving on her mother's loss, and she cannot talk much about it, and she does not like to talk. She does not like to go out. She likes to stay with herself all the time. And she has started talking less now because she's missing her mother more and more, and she is feeling that kind of hollow, that kind of vacant space in her life. Now, here in the third stanza, the poet says that she cannot explain the feeling of a mother's death at all. So that is why she has written this beautiful poem as a tribute. And the mother's death has silenced the poet's mother also, and the poet is also speechless now. She hardly talks about it or about anything to anyone. She has become completely silent. Here in this slide, again, there are the word meanings. Now let's come to the poetic devices. Some poetic devices are used in this poem, mainly alliteration, oxymoron, transferred epithet, personification, repetition. These are some of the poetic devices which are used in the poem. So now let's go through them one by one. As you all know, poetic devices are those devices which are used to in simpler words to decorate the poem, to enhance the effectiveness of the poem, so that when the reader is reading the poem, the reader may enjoy the poetry into a certain level. So, alliteration, first of all, in simple words, what is alliteration? Alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds which come in the beginning of the words in the same line. The words should be more than one word, like two or three words. The sound, if it is repeated, then in the same line, then it is called as alliteration. Like the examples are given here in the slide. "Stood still" is an example of alliteration. "Through there," "my mother's," "terribly transient," "silent silences," all of them are starting with the same sound, with the same alphabet, and they are placed together in the one line. So that is all these are examples of alliteration. Then we have oxymoron. I already, while I was explaining the stanza, the labored is oxymoron was where two opposite words, completely contrasting words, are put together by the poet. So here labored ease, and I've already explained you what is labored ease, that the poet is working very, very hard to come out easily and to make her life easy after her mother's death. But she's laboring very hard. She's struggling so hard, because when you're laboring, you cannot be at rest. When you are at rest, you cannot be laboring. So these are two opposite thoughts, two opposite ideas. Then transferred epithet, again I explained you already that transient feet. Feet is a noun. Transient is used as an adjective to describe the feet, but here the meaning is transferred into a deeper level. As I told you, that the transient nature of humans, like the way they are born, then they grow up, the entire time their body undergo changes, their life situations keep changing, and so many ups and downs happen in the life once, and after experiencing a lifetime, they grow old and then they die, and their footprints are never to be seen on this earth. On the other hand, the nature, it remains usually the same, or very little changes or unnoticeable changes are seen in the nature, but otherwise it remains the same. Then we have personification. Personification is a figure of speech in which an object or inanimate object, or we'll say non-living thing, is given a human quality. So here, silence, which is completely we can say it's completely an inanimate thing, it is given the quality of becoming silent, which is a human quality. Only humans can talk or become silent. So here, this human quality is given to silence. And then last one, we have repetition, which means any word or phrase or line, it is being repeated in the poem again and again. So silences is again an example of repetition. Now, when we move further on the deeper analysis of the poem, if we talk about the central idea of the poem, it is the same thing that Shirley Toulson, she has given a tribute, she has written a tribute to her mother, and three stages in the passage of time, how the time has passed, those from the mother's childhood to her present 20, 30 years later, and then finally to her death. These three phases have been described in this particular poem, and that is the central idea of the poem, that is a tribute. And the last stage, basically, it is showing us, it is giving the poet a nostalgic feeling. Now, irony in the poem, it is very, very ironical that the poet is remembering her mother, and then she is picturing or fantasizing her mother looking at the photograph and remembering her own childhood. So she says that whenever, if had my mother been alive now and she would have looked at the photograph, she would have smiled and laughed after looking at the photograph. And on the other hand, the poet would have seen at her mother smiling at the photograph, and the poet would also be smiling at her mother's smile. So this is completely ironical because both the smiles here are talking about the darker side. Deeper meaning is that the smile is completely vanished now. The mother is dead, and so is the mother's childhood, and so is the poet's smile. So all this, the happy state, the mother in the happy state, and the happiness of the poet, they both are connected to a darker side. And lastly, what are the three phases which are described in the poem? Again, I would repeat again by saying the first phase was the happy childhood of the mother, where she's gone on the beach with her two girl cousins. The second phase is the happy moments when her mother is there at the beach paddling in the water. And then the third is when the about the poet's sadness because of the mother's death. So this is all for today. I hope you understood the poem. Um, I'm really hopeful that you understood, but in case there's some kind of doubt, kindly leave a comment, and definitely I'm going to answer back your comment. And thank you so much for watching the video, and have a nice day. Thank you.